Thinking about self-publishing and don't know where to start? Join the Spa Girls each week for 30 minutes of honest advice, tips and resources. I'm Trudy J and I am here with Wendy Valla.
Hello.
Shah Barrett.
Hi there.
Cheryl is not able to be with us this week, but instead we have an amazing guest. Yay!
Yay!
Lucy Lennox, welcome.
Yay!
Hi, thank you for having me.
Lucy, it is our sheer pleasure to have you here. We are so excited to have you here.
It's going to be awesome. I'm
Thank
excited.
you. I am a huge fangirl, so I can't even, I feel like this is all a little bit of a dream. So I'm so excited to be here.
You're awesome. I like you already. So Shah, if you could read out Lucy's bio and we'll get right into the interview.
Absolutely. Excuse me turning around because I'm looking at my other screen. So after enjoying creative writing as a child, Lucy didn't write her first novel until she was over 40 years old. Her debut novel, Borrowing Blue, which is, side note, amazing, that whole series, anyway, that's me fangirling, was published in the autumn of 2016. Lucy has an English literature degree from Vanderbilt University, but that doesn't hold a candle to the years and years of staying up all night reading tantalising novels on her own. She has one husband, 3 children, plays tennis, and hates folding laundry.
I need to
agree with that one.
Yeah, who likes folding laundry? Surely there's no one.
Lucy writes male gay romance with heart, humour and heat. To date, she's published 24 novels herself, 12 co-written novels across 3 series, and numerous short stories in her series worlds.
Awesome.
Yay, impressive.
So I'm excited.
Impressive.
So let's start off with a little bit about your journey into self-publishing and writing. So you said you didn't get started until after 40, which I think is awesome. I love stories like this. But yeah, just give us your journey.
Yeah.
Okay. I always get afraid that I always like to preface this by saying I'm a novelist and not a poet. So if I go on and on, you have to cut in and cut me off because I'm a long talker.
Okay.
But I was actually in corporate marketing for years, and then I became a stay-at-home mom. I had 3 kids, and I always still wanted to do something. So most recently, I was a professional quilter and quilt pattern designer, which is another long story that I'm not going to get into. But and the summer of 2016, I asked a quilter friend of mine who was a big romance fan, and I have always been a big romance novel reader, for some book recommendations. And this Mormon quilter friend of mine said, "Have you ever read MM?" And I said, "I don't know what that means." And she said, male romance. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll try it. I was surprised that, this woman who I would not have expected to read gay romance, I didn't realize women would be reading male romance, recommended Try by Ella Frank. And she also recommended Boss Man by Vi Keeland, which is not male, it's a male-female romantic comedy. And I read those 2 books in, I think, July of 2016, and I loved them so much. And my sister is an author. She writes young adult and middle grade. And so she had been a full-time author for 10 years. So it was already in the back of my head. My mom was always saying, "Oh, you should try and write too." And I had done my senior project in school was on poetry. I had taken creative writing a little bit in college. So it wasn't completely out of the realm, of possibility, but I thought, okay, the kids are going back to school August 1st. My husband was going on a business trip. So I thought I'll try. Why not? My kids are a little older. They're, lower maintenance. And so I'll try, because I read these 2 books and I thought they were spicy and fun and clever and just, I wish I could do that. I came away from reading both of them thinking, gosh, I wish I could do that. So I started writing on August 1st and I wrote a book in a week.
Wow.
It just came out that fast. And I was like, holy cow. And so it was just like lighting a match. And I just wrote. But I was writing male-female romance because I was worried about writing in a space that wasn't mine. I was worried about not being an own voices author and writing about my lived experience. And so it took a little while before a sort of a big name romance author friend of my sister said, what does she like to read? And my sister said, well, she's reading male. And she's like, well, then she should write male. And I learned a little bit more about the genre. and how many women are writing in the genre and how many women are reading in the genre. And so I thought it was a weekend in October, and I thought, okay, just for fun, and I'm not going to tell anybody about it, I'm going to write a gay romance. And it's not for publication. I'm not going to share it or anything. And I wrote Borrowing Blue, and I loved it. And I wrote it for me. And I loved it so much. And I love the characters, and it's this huge family. And it was made to be a series starter because I wanted all of the brothers, stories. Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, this is it. I'm going to do it. And I published it American Thanksgiving, which that year was November 23rd. And I had heard that there was this phenomenon called Kindle Moss, where people get Kindles and gift cards for Christmas. So have as many books out as you can by Christmas, because there's like this boom. I was like, okay, go, go, go. So I basically wrote around the clock. I ditched my family totally. Like they were chopped mush at that point. And I got Borrowing Blue came out November 23rd. Taming Teddy came out December 11th.
Wow.
Jumping Jude came out Christmas Eve. And it was just, I did not know what rapid release was at the time. I didn't know what a lot of things were at the time.
Oh my gosh.
But now I know that I tripped and fell into rapid release, and it obviously made a massive difference. And I went from earning 3 figures the first month to 5 figures my second month.
Wow. That's fantastic.
And it's just been a whirlwind ever since. Like I still can't believe it. My husband and I still will catch each other's eye and be like, what's happening? It's changed our lives. It's totally changed our lives. And I went into this thinking, if I could earn a couple $100 a month to help put away for our kids' college education, that would be ideal, because we have 3 teenagers and the first one is going to college this August. So this was, 4.5 years ago. And I thought, that would give me a few years to start saving up, and they would have more choices in where they would go to college. And now here I am,
that's so
it's
cool.
Just, yeah.
What an amazing story.
That's awesome.
Did you sleep in that time between November and December? Were you
No. And you know what else is funny? My sister was my beta reader at the time, and she's really meticulous, which means she's slow. And I didn't have time for that. Yeah. And she also had her own stuff to work on. And so when it came to the 3rd book, I couldn't use her. And so I found a volunteer beta reader in my genre, Leslie Copeland, and she just came out of the woodwork and said, hey, do you need somebody to read for you? I'm like, oh yes. And so I put the book, I think it was Jude. Yeah, it was Jude. I put it in Google Docs. And then as I was writing, she started at the beginning, and she went through and made her notes while I'm writing at the bottom. And then when I finished, I went back to the top and started revising based on her notes while she went finish. And then she would come, and we would just go like that through Google Docs around the clock.
Gosh.
Love it.
Yeah. And so after that, she became my professional beta reader, and then she became my PA, and then she ended up starting an author services business, and now she runs the largest author service business in my genre, and she's still my PA too, which I don't know how she does it.
That's
wow.
amazing. What an amazing
such a cool story. I love it.
Yeah. I just want to, how many words are your books? How many?
So they started off, when I first started that first series, I was going for, my goal was 72,000 per book.
Yeah.
I think my shortest one, well, there's kind of a holiday novella that's like 65,000, but I think my shortest one is 69,000. And then in that series, they would go in like mid 70s, but now I write longer. Now they're more in the mid 80s.
Oh, wow.
But even so, they're not short. They're not short books.
No, they're not.
I was hoping you were going to say maybe 30,000, and then I feel better about myself. Yeah.
How many books do you write a year, Lucy?
So like 7 or 8. Wow. But and the thing, okay, so I started publishing November of 2016, and then in May of 2017. I had just put out the 6th and the final full book in that Maid Marian series, like the final brother, came out May 5th. And on that same day, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And so 4 years ago on Sunday, I think it was the 20th, I had a double mastectomy on June 20th. And that was right when I started co-writing, like that month was when I started co-writing with Sloan Kennedy, which was a lifesaver because we published a book July 4th. So I was able to keep, like with her help, I still had books coming out. And then I published the first book in my next series. That book is Facing West. I published that August. Wow. I look back and I don't know how I did it, but I think, I think Claire Contreras gave a really great talk at RAM, the same RAM. Was it the same RAM we were talking about in 2019 about, she's gone through being diagnosed with cancer twice. And I loved what she said about it's okay to fight.
Yeah.
And it's okay to not fight.
Yeah.
And one of her experiences, she fought and she wrote while she was at chemo. And one of them, she didn't. She let herself let it go and be okay with that. And so I always want to preface it by saying either one of those are great choices.
Yeah.
For me, I wanted to pretend like nothing, like it worked for me to pretend like nothing was happening. And I was very lucky to be diagnosed very early on. So the mastectomy, took care of it. I didn't need radiation. I didn't need chemo. All I needed was reconstructive surgery. So for me, if I could keep going and keep working, I didn't get down about it. I didn't get, get depressed about it and stuff. I didn't focus on being in discomfort and things like that. That worked for me. But whenever I tell the story about working through that, I always want to say don't hear that I worked through it and think, well, you should work through it if you're diagnosed with the same thing. That's what worked for me, but it wouldn't work for everybody. And it shouldn't work for everybody. Yeah. But so I would say, that helped me stay focused on something else besides the cancer. And like I said, I say that, but it was relatively straightforward for me at the time, but I kept going and just kept going. And at the time, and I think this is a trap that a lot of authors can fall into. So I don't know that I've ever gotten a chance, and all the times I've talked to author groups or been in author groups on Facebook and talked about this, I don't think I've ever had a chance to say this. I had a lot of people early on, because I had such quick success, say this wave isn't going to last forever. Mm-hmm. You need to go and take advantage of it and ride it as hard as you can right now while it's happening. Get as many books out right now while you can, because you're not going to be this big deal, successful author forever. It will die down. It dies down for everybody. And that's going to be you one day. So at the time I was like, oh God, I'm hot right now. I got to go and get as many books out while I'm hot, because it's going to poof one day and be gone. Mm-hmm. And here I am now 4.5 years later, and thank goodness. And I'm so grateful, but I also work really hard for it. But you can't keep going at that pace. Mm-hmm. You can't keep working at the pace where you're trying to take advantage of every day. I work 7 days a week, and I'm at my computer by 8 a.m. I take a giant nap in the afternoon, but I'm back on the computer after my family eats dinner, and I'm at the computer until 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, almost every night. I work all the time, and that is not sustainable. Yeah. And so a lot of what this year, every year that I've been in this business, I've learned some big lessons. And this year I'm really grappling with work-life balance, but it's hard too, because I have all these stories I want to tell, and I love what I do.
Yeah. I think it's a really good lesson. It's health is so important, but like you say, the longevity is probably just as important.
And we all hear those stories, don't we, where other authors are doing so many books, and you sort of feel inside, why am I not doing as many as them? And there's that pressure the whole time. I've got to write more, but you're right, this is your career. You've got to do what's right.
Got to think long term, right? Got to be sustainable. Don't burn yourself out.
Right. And I think it's important to talk about, I think it's important. I don't want people to look at what I'm doing and think, oh, this must come so easy to her. It's important to for me to be transparent and say, it doesn't come easy. I work really a lot of hours for this, and you're right. Why? But then again, I know why for me. I'm very money motivated, I'm very success oriented. I take a lot of pride and identity in success. I'm for the first time in 20 years, I'm the primary breadwinner in our family. And that is really important to me, after all the years that I was able to be a stay-at-home mom and my husband was working so hard for our family. So, there are a lot of factors for sure involved in that.
Do you think you still have in the back of your mind that idea of those people saying to you in the beginning, oh, it's not going to last? Do you feel like that's part of it, or you kind of feel confident now that you are okay and it is going to last?
I feel confident now. I would say just in the last 6 months, I was talking to my co-author, May Archer, about this just in the last couple of days. Just in the last 6 months, I finally have, convinced myself, or finally not believe, but I now know I will be okay. Like I now know I can write a story that can sell. I can write a story that readers want. And I now feel like if the bottom were to drop out of my career for whatever reason, I could start again. I feel like I could start in a different genre, or I could start again in this genre. And I know now that I have the writing chops to succeed. And whether I would build up this same level of success or not, I don't know. But I also don't necessarily need this same level of success. I never expected it to be going this strong. But knowing that, I now know that no matter what happens, I can make a living writing. And that's really amazing. But I don't have the same struggles with imposter syndrome that I have a lot of author friends who struggle with that. I don't have that.
I'm a cheerer for that.
Good. Bad for Wendy, good for you. Awesome. Can we talk a little bit quickly about male romance? I just want to think, if someone's listening to this and is thinking that they'd want to get into male romance, are there things that are particular to this kind of romance that are different for, say, male female romance or other kinds of romance?
Yes. I think, and the first thing I'm going to say applies to anyone who's writing in any genre. Be aware when you're reading writing advice or business advice, marketing advice, when you're listening to a podcast or reading a book or reading a Facebook group, whatever, what genre an author publishes in makes a difference to whatever advice they're giving you. And we often forget that, if somebody is giving you advice about how to price your book, about whether or not to be in KU or be wide, how long your book should be, what editor to use, all of those things depend on genre. The answer is different depending on your genre. So, be aware that when, like for us and who, those of us who write male romance, I'm in author groups all the time where people are suggesting a perma-free first in series or a 99-cent first in series. And that is not something that's successful in our genre. Not to say it's not successful. It's not something that you have to do. You don't have to give away a free first in series in our genre. And I shouldn't make that sound like it's a blanket statement either. I mean, obviously there probably are authors who are doing it and having great success, but the thing is test and see what works for you. So, as with any genre, look at the charts in that genre, see what's selling, depending on what your goal is. If your goal is to sell a lot of copies, which not everybody's has the same goal, but if your goal is to sell a lot of copies, look and see what's selling, look and see what the titling conventions are, the way the blurbs are. Like our blurbs are written a little bit different than MF blurbs. Our blurbs are written different than MF dark blurbs. They're a little bit less choppy. That's not to say that you can't do a choppy MF style blurb. Like, do it and try it, because maybe the fact that it's different will be the thing that captures somebody's attention. But I guess my advice is be aware of what's happening in your genre. And if you're going to be different, be sure about like why, what are you expecting from that? And, and then test it. In terms of the content, it's interesting to me. There are a lot of genre expectations in male that have to do with the LGBT community. You need to know and respect the LGBT community in general. You need to know the language. You need to know people who are in the community. You need to understand a lot of the nuances, like using the term sexual orientation instead of sexual preference, not saying preferred pronouns, but saying what are your pronouns. So there's a lot of nuance to language that if you just have straight up honest ignorance about it, you need to educate yourself about it, because the readers are very sensitive to, those things. So that would probably be my biggest cautionary advice, is to make sure you're being respectful to the readership in that way. And then, it's interesting. There's some tropes that don't work as well because of the readership. Like for instance, clean, and I don't even like this expression. People in our genre don't even like the expression clean romance, because that implies sex is dirty. So clean gay romance is not a successful subgenre right now. And I could probably talk for 3 hours about why that is. But that's not something. It will hopefully be one day, it may be one day, but one of the reasons why a lot of women are drawn to reading male romance has to do with, there's a sexual element to it. And it's not that simple. I don't want to, I don't mean to, it's not a fetishism or anything like that, but there is a sexual, piece of it. And so that's my take on why clean or sweet, whatever you want to call it, closed door sex isn't necessarily a successful subgenre. Bully romance, again, if you think about the LGBT community, they don't want to read about somebody falling in love with their bully. That's not to say, there's an exception to every rule. That's not to say you can't have a wild breakout bully romance. There are bully romances in our genre, but if you are a debut author coming into the genre and you want to play it safe, maybe don't be the one to take those big risks at first until you've built up the readership. So I guess that those would probably be the other thing. I guess also, if you're interested in getting into male romance, be aware of who the readers are. There's a giant misconception that your audience is gay men, and there are for sure gay men in your audience. But like my reader group, I think 8,000 readers in my reader group. And according to Facebook Insights, it's like 92% women.
Wow.
It's a very, very skewed readership compared to what you would think if you were just on the outside looking in. So you have to be aware, because at the same time, you don't want to necessarily write for the female reader when you're writing about gay male romance. You want to write for the gay male reader also. So you're,
it's a balancing act, isn't it?
It's so interesting. I'd heard that too, that there's a lot of women reading male romance. Have you got any insights as to why, or is it just women don't mind and it's as long as it's romance it doesn't matter, or what's the?
No, it's actually this, and this is again my disclaimers, this is just my take, right? I think because it's not just skews women, it also skews middle-aged. And I think, so I'm the quintessential male reader. I'm 47. And I think that my generation was raised to be strong, feminist, powerful, not rely on a man. It is, quote unquote, not okay for us to want to be the damsel in distress and be rescued. So there are a lot of dynamics in the standard male-female romance that make us uncomfortable. We don't feel like we can self-insert in a damsel in distress storyline where we have to self-insert as the female. But at the same time, there might be a part of us that wants to self-insert as the damsel in distress, but that's quote unquote not okay. We're not supposed to want that. So there are a lot of gender dynamics in play that are problematic for us when we read male-female romance. When the hero male character says something or acts a certain way towards the heroine female character, sometimes we're like, oh gosh, is that sexist or not? We can't decide. When you read the exact same story, obviously not the exact same, it would be very different with two men, but when you read the same type trope, let's say with two men, gender is gone. The gender dynamics between those two MCs are over. They are equal. When it comes to gender dynamics. So now I can read that same romance tropes or that same romance setup or hook or whatever you want to call it without the burden of that gender pressure that is so caught up in us as women after years of bull, and all the junk that we have from our cultural whatever regardless of how, you can't get to be 47, for instance, without having a bunch of gender junk, positive and negative.
Yeah.
So that to me is why we are drawn to it. Now, there's another piece of it, which has to do with toxic masculinity. Mm-hmm. Like we want, and, I think any reader of romance wants to see emotion and vulnerability and tenderness and affection and gentleness, and that, that cupping the cheek and that sweet, vulnerable kindness. But to see two men do that, like where we finally get to strip away all the macho, toxic masculinity and see two men without all of that, that again, that bull,
strenuous
is, And so it's awesome. Instead of seeing that jerk, big man on campus type guy who's like, thinks he's all that, we get to see what my co-author, May Archer, always calls the tender underbelly. We get to see the tender underbelly. Yeah. And in male-female romance, it's still not necessarily okay or popular to see that tender underbelly of the guy.
Yeah.
Not really. He still needs to be the guy, right? He still needs to be alpha. In some respects,
even with the beta romances, where the hero's a beta, more of a beta hero, that's still a tough hill to climb up, that one, for the writer to get.
So like in male-female romance right now, you couldn't necessarily have a blockbuster hit where the woman is the billionaire.
No.
Sarcastic, angry.
Many have tried.
Right. And the guy is homeless, and needs a leg up, Yeah.
Yeah, he's bought the cafe next door, and he needs,
that wouldn't work. That's so fascinating. That's
Thank you for that explanation, because it's not. It's like, I think, going back to your earlier point, don't assume that and I think in terms of the readership or why people are reading or who's reading, it's the old story, never assume.
There's a giant misconception that when people are like, it's women who, I guess it's like men like lesbian porn and this is the same thing. And I'm like, no. There may be some people who it's that equivalent for them, and that's fine. We're allowed to like what we like and be, be turned on by what we want to be turned on by. That's okay if that's as simple as it is for some people. But it's in my opinion, it's much more complex than that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. All right. I feel like I need to move on to some of the other millions of questions that I have for you. So let's talk quickly about, so you said before that you work really hard and you do these long hours. So can you talk to me a little bit about that, like how you treat your writing career as a business, and what some of the things that you kind of have made as part of that to make you so successful?
Yeah. I definitely treat this as a business. And sometimes I have to because I love it and it's also my heart. And sometimes I have to remind myself that it can be a combination of both, but I feel like in this business, we as authors are sometimes held to a different standard when it comes to the fact that if we talk about this as a business, then we're just money grubbers and we don't care about the craft and the art of it, as if it's an either or scenario. We can't write for the heart and the art or write for the money. You can't do both. And that's very frustrating to me because I love what I do and I love writing and I love stories and I write the stories that I want to read. And I'm a whale reader and I read way more than I like to admit, because if my readers, I always say this, and now the cat's out of the bag, but I always say if my readers knew how much I read, they would be like, stop reading and write more. But I read like a book a day. I read a lot.
Wow.
And when I'm not writing, I'm reading. And my family can tell you like that, I thankfully, obviously I work from home, but my husband also works from home and my kids' school is like a mile up the road. And so they're here all the time, and obviously in the pandemic, they were here a lot more than that. So it's not like we don't get family time, and we have sit down family dinner every night that is sacrosanct. But other than that, I write or read. But in terms of treating it like a business, for me, I am a procrastinator, a massive procrastinator. And I have always had a self-identity of being lazy. And this is really interesting. Yeah. Okay. So I never did my homework when I was in grade school, never. And I was lucky because I was smart. And so I did well on standardized tests. And so I did well enough to fool everybody and to get into college and all that on standardized tests. Right. But then like when I graduated from high school and college, like the grades weren't there, but the diploma was, so that was fine. But then when I got into the corporate world, I actually started working really hard, and I found that I really loved it, but I couldn't overcome this self-identity of being lazy. And so this still plagues me to this day, because as a stay-at-home mom for all of those years, you discount that as well. That's not hard work. I'm lucky. I'm at home. I get to be in my pajamas half the day. I get to go to the playground. Like,
oh my God, being a mom is
not
the hardest
hard work
thing. Like, it's harder than going to work. I want to say that right now.
Right. And my husband would not have switched with me for all the money in the world either.
Mine would have not either. No.
Right. So I still had this identity. So when I started this career, and going back to thinking, okay, you've got to ride the wave, I went into it with this hard-nosed, almost like addiction mentality of like, this has to be my thing. I have to like put my nose to the grindstone, because if I let anything distract me, boom, it's going to be over. It's going to be gone. I'm going to be like, oh, I'm over it. I'm not interested in writing anymore, because I still had that self-identity of fly by night, lazy, can't stick with anything. And so when I started feeling that tendency to procrastinate, well, the first thing I did is I booked in with an editor who was not flexible. So when that book was due, even if I had to stay up all night, like I was some kind of teenager writing a term paper. And I did that for the first several books until I got a little bit smart in that, probably until I got cancer. And then I was like, screw this. I don't have to stay up all night and do this. I'm my own boss for a reason. But anyway, I got to the point where it worked for me. And this is not for everybody. Do not take this as prescriptive advice. This does not work for everybody. It worked for me to think of this like a job. And this is the metaphor that I use. Trash collectors don't get to have mental health days. Trash collectors don't get to just not be feeling it today. I'm not going to work today because I'm not feeling it. People who need to pay their bills have to show up for work. Even if it's a bad day at work, it's a bad day at work, and you're going to have to still get some work done. So to me, that trash collector image in my head, you know, those guys who ride on the back of the truck, even if it's pouring down rain, those guys don't get to experience a creative block, you know, and spend a whole week just feeling sorry for themselves. That's not an option in the real world. And I hear my dad's words coming out of my mouth, so forgive me, but like, and it is a little bit of an old school mentality, but like I said, that's what works for me. That's not necessarily going to work for everybody. That might be too harsh for some people, but when it's hard for me to wake up in the morning and get to work, I remember that I am extremely privileged in that my work doesn't happen standing on the back of a freezing cold trash truck. My work happens in my pajamas, doing work I love, with on the Zoom sprints with my closest author friends who we get to chit chat during our little 5-minute breaks, you know, and I'm extremely privileged to do what I do.
How long do you Zoom sprint?
And that helps.
Can I ask you about how long do you sprint for?
So we started off sprinting over on a Slack channel where we would, you know, message, okay, you know, and we would go from 8 a.m. and we go for 55 minutes and then we break for 5 and then we start again. So we're always going at the top of the hour, stop at the 55, go again at the top of the hour. And we learned pretty quickly that on Slack, yeah, we're all in. Okay, we're writing. We'll see you back at the 55. Well, then you can go do whatever you want. You know, nobody knows if you're writing. And so we kind of all realized that nobody was really doing what they were supposed to be doing. So I heard it might have been on Spa Girls podcast. One of the authors talked about Zoom sprints. It's somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was like, guys, maybe we should try it. And I have a Zoom account just from the pandemic and the conference that I did last year. I was like, let's try it. So we have been doing it for 6 months now, and it works great. So we get on at 8:55, then we chit chat. And there are days where we chit chat a little too long, and then we start again at the top of the hour and we go. So we do that from 8 to noon. And then a smaller portion of us do it again in the evening from 7 to 10:30.
Right.
And it's really fun. It's like being
you've built your own office kind of thing, haven't you? You've built your own water cooler and formed your own virtual office. Yeah. And it's amazing, isn't it? The power of other people around working. It really does help.
You see how time passes.
Yes.
So like Sylvia Violet is in my Zoom sprint, and she writes fast, and she is a workhorse, and she uses some dictation and stuff, and she does write a little bit shorter novels than I do, but like, you know, when I see her like lapping us and getting, you know, she's like, okay, I'm starting my next book, and we're like, what? Okay, I guess time is passing and I got to get going. That's encouraging for me. Like, you know, or if she says, okay, you know, I've got 3,000 words so far today, I'm like, damn, like I want 3,000 words today. So I'm going to, you know, be sure and be less distracted on the next one. It's fantastic for that, but it's also great because, you know, there are a lot of little conversations that when you're already talking to somebody or you're already on with somebody, you can mention, oh, hey, you know, I got this email about this promo opportunity. It's not something you would have gone out of your way to ask somebody else about, but if you're already chit-chatting, you can ask them about. So that's been super valuable to me. Yeah. Those little conversations that are incidental. You know?
Yeah. The little water cooler catch up.
Yeah, we do that. We've just started we're kicking into the Zoom sprints at the moment, us lot, and they will be kicking up a gear though, as it turns out.
Yes,
they will be.
So now that we've talked to you, Lucy.
So I'm hearing in my head already 55 minutes. I couldn't keep going for 50. Like I'm too used to my 20. Like, well, you get all these things.
We used to do 25. Is it Pomodoro that's 25? Yeah, we used to do that. But then I don't know if you guys have talked about Cal Newport's Deep Work. That
Judy
book.
And I have,
Yeah. And I mean, 55 still doesn't let you get into deep work, but at least when you're on a roll, and like we've said, like theoretically, we have said, if you're on a roll, just keep going. Like you don't need to stop for the break, but when none of us do that, because we hear you hear your friends talking and you're like, oh, I need to know what they're saying. FOMO, you know, I'm not going to miss out on the conversation.
Oh, I would say too, probably for your hands, like it's one thing to be doing deep work if you're focusing on but to be writing at speed for 55 minutes is pretty tough on your hands. So probably I'm saying just out there that it's
you're right
to do a stretch, you know.
Do you have anyone in your family put the pressure on you that you were working too hard, or you know, what are you doing? You're working from home, why are you not coming out for a coffee? Or was there anyone that made that sort of you know, approach to you? Because you know, all writers we talk to say to us, oh, but they don't take me seriously, you know, because I'm working from home. Did that happen?
Yeah, that I do. I mean, my husband is probably the one who first of all, so I have 3 teenagers, so they don't care. They're doing their own thing. They don't want to, they're not missing out on quality time with me and wishing that I was spending more time, you know, playing cards with them. That's not something they're wishing for. But my husband, he and I are really, really close. And my mom always says we're enmeshed, you know, we're in each other's pockets. And so it bothers him because he wants to like watch a movie in the evenings and stuff. And so it bothers him. But at the same time, he recognizes that like this in the grand, you know, we've been together for 20 something years. And so in the grand scheme of things, you know, these few years, like my hard work is changing our lives. Like we paid off our mortgage and we are, you know, able to, you know, do this paying for college. And, you know, we helped my mother buy a retirement condo and things like that, that are making our lives in general so much easier, and they're securing our future in such a way that he's so incredibly supportive. He tries not to do that. You know, he tries not, he doesn't, I wouldn't say he ever necessarily puts pressure on me, but I can tell he, you know, wishes that I was more fun sometimes. But I think in that, you know, but But I keep reminding him I was never fun, by the way. You knew what you were getting into, but I was never fun. Brilliant. But like last week, you know, we were in Cozumel, Mexico on vacation with the family, and my daughter brought 2 friends, and we were scuba diving, which is something that he did before we met. And when we were first dating, I shouldn't say stupidly, but it was one of those things where you're like, oh, I'm trying to impress him, so I'll agree to get certified to scuba dive, even though I've never had any interest in fish or reefs or scuba diving. So I got certified back then, I didn't realize at the time that it sort of like signed me up for scuba diving as often as possible for the rest of my life. So like our family vacation last week was scuba diving because that's his thing that he loves. And so the kids are certified now. And so I went diving, you know, all 7 of us went diving. And so I think it's just like, it's not that we're not getting that valuable time together. It's just, it's different now. Yeah. And like he and I go out to lunch together a lot. So it's not that we're not seeing each other. It's just, it's different.
Yeah.
It's just adjusting, isn't it?
And do you find your brain is still able to wake up at 7, but just, did you mention a nap? Because I'm just astounded by, so you've got your 4 hours of writing in the morning and then you're doing it again at 7 till 10, did you say, around that time? Yeah. And you've obviously had a break in the middle of the day, like brain wise, I'm thinking, from writing, but I'm guessing that it kicks into gear again. I just know I'm a zombie after dark.
No, it's different. So I'm a napper. My mother was a napper too. And I used to hate it when my mother napped in the afternoon, but now it's the best thing ever. But so like I usually go out to lunch with my husband, sometimes our kids, and then I'll come back and I'll lay down in my bed and read until I fall asleep. And then I'll sleep until like 5. And then I'll get up and either cook dinner or actively get out of cooking dinner if I can help it and make my husband cook dinner. And then we'll do the dinner, you know, family dinner and everything. So I've been up, you know, for a couple hours by the time I get back to work, but I have noticed, and I was talking about this the other day, like it's different writing. There's a different feel to those evening hours. Yeah. And so it's not fresh. I wouldn't start something new that requires the most energy and brain power, you know, but a lot of times, especially now, I'm writing in a series that I know so well. I know these characters so well. I know the setting so well. And in the last like year to 18 months, I've been outlining. I used to be a full pantser, but now I at least sort of casually outline. That helps a lot because then you know what you're writing. And I think, you know, also when you've been doing it for a while, or you've done as many books as I have, like you have your rhythm and you have your, unfortunately you have your favorite phrases even, you know, I don't know if you guys are like that, but like, I feel like I'm writing the same stuff over and over again sometimes. And people read it and they're like, this was great. I'm like, really? Cause I kind of feel like it was the exact same thing I've written 25 times before, but okay, great.
But then that's why they come back to it because they want the same thing, you know?
That's true. That's true. They know what to expect.
With your outline, what do you do there? You just jot down some notes or?
Yeah. This lives on my desk, Romancing the Beat, Gwen Hayes.
Yes.
And you can see it's even, for those of you who are only listening, like it opens automatically to the page that has the romance beats on it. And then I actually use Scrivener writing software for writing. And I use a Scrivener template that has the beats already in chapters. And so I went, I outlined a new book a couple of nights ago, and I go into that and go into the note cards in Scrivener. And I basically just like jot down kind of like a paragraph or two about what happens in that chapter and for that beat. And then, and those are, I think there's 20 beats in her setup, which is not, I work my chapter. I usually write like 2,500 to 3,200 word chapters. So that's going to be too short of a book if I just do 20 chapters. So usually somewhere in there, now it's gotten to the point I've done this enough that I know that like there's something she's not missing, but something I like to do that's not in her beats, which is the fun and games beats. Yeah. Which I think are in Save the Cat. I can't remember, but the fun and games, I find I add 2 chapters because I'll do dual alternating POV. So I'll add 2 chapters of fun and games, which is basically, you know, that rom-com montage of them in their false happy ever after. And those are two of the chapters that I add. And then while I'm writing, I'll go off script, and usually like a lot of times, like during a sex scene, for instance, I'll be like, oh, I kind of want to see what this scene looks like from the other guy's POV. So then I'll switch and I'll add, every time I add 2 chapters. So that's how I do it. So it's just like a paragraph or 2 for each chapter. And then once I start writing, a lot of times I'll go off the rails and I won't end up writing what I outlined, and that's fine too. If it gets me there, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
It's funny how often that happens too, right? You outline and then, no, I'm completely not where the outline was going. Okay.
Like, what book was that?
And I do that with co-authors too. I've been lucky to write with 3 different authors, and we have an agreement that like, sometimes the best stuff happens when you go off the rails.
Yeah.
And so just do it, follow your fingers and see. That's usually where the good stuff happens.
Oh,
and if not, then you go back.
In the middle of the night when you wake up and you go, of course, you know, I had one of those last night. I was like, of course, that's what needs to happen. And I was like, how will I remember this? You know, write it down.
No, never. No, not one single time would I ever remember. I have a strange system where I stand my cell phone up. I've always done it. Stand my cell phone up beside the bed, and when I get up and then when I look at that, I go, right, that's why. And it's just a memory trigger to what I was thinking in the night. It's always been that way. I've always done it.
Oh wow, that's handy.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I've always done it. It's like, it's just as soon as I stand it up, I can relax and go to sleep. It's like I've stood that up for a reason. So and then I go back.
I would wake up and say, oh, it stood up for a reason, but I have absolutely no idea what the reason is.
Well, yeah, if you knew my brain, I don't remember a lot, but that's what I do remember.
That reminds me of what they used to say about, wasn't there a study done that like if you study for an exam while you're smoking weed, I'm such a good girl rule follower, but if you study for an exam while you're smoking weed, you better be high when you take the exam.
Yeah,
that's what it reminds me of. Like whatever mode you're in when you have the idea in the first place is the mode you need to be in to retrieve it.
Oh, that's so funny.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So you need, I mean, I used to always listen to music whenever I was writing, and that got me in the tappy mode too. Yeah.
I can't. I cannot. If I do, it has to be instrumental, or else my brain will pay too much attention to the words.
I start trying to sing the words to the, exactly. Yeah.
I'm just rock and roll all the way.
Yeah. Anyway. Okay. So we're all different. We are, and that's awesome. So the one last area that I really wanted to talk to you about is an author called Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and we all saw her speak at RAM, Romance Author Mastermind, in 2019, and she was awesome. And apparently you've met her in person and went out to dinner with her, so I'm totally jealous of that.
We're trying not to be jealous about.
We've often talked sweet. Yeah, she does come across like that. So can you talk to us a little bit about what she says and her thesis almost, I feel like, because she is a professor.
Yeah, she is. And she's super smart. I would listen to her talk about anything for any reason. When we heard her speak at RAM and learned about her process of, the experiments that she does and how she, makes them, scientific. And I am not a science person, but like the scientific method basically behind how she collects her data was fascinating. But my experience with Jennifer Lynn Barnes goes back to that summer that I started writing, when I, got inspired by those books that I had read, and I met up with my sister, the author. I have another sister who's not an author. We'll call her the other. I always call her the other sister.
Must be a bit of family pressure there. Must be a bit of family pressure to join the troop.
Exactly. And so anyway, we actually met up at my dad's house, which is sort of halfway between where both of us live. And I said, I think I'm going to try and write. And she's like, oh, you so should. So we were talking about what I wanted to write about. And she said, remember, because she had told me about Jennifer Lynn Barnes' id Talk, which for those of you who are listening, you can get it on audio. It's on the rwa.org website. They have audio recordings of some of their past conference presentations. And this is one of them, Jennifer Lynn Barnes writing to the id.
Which I have that one and I love it.
And I think it's like $6 or something. Yeah. But it's amazing. It's a game changer. But the concept is, that we have these pleasure centers in our brain, and there are certain universal pleasure items, and I'm not coming up with the right words, which is always great when you're an author, but there's certain things that most of us are drawn to for various reasons, because they speak to that basic, almost child inside of us. And there are things like, this is why billionaire series are really successful, because, money is something that gives us a lot of security. And we can fantasize about living a luxurious life. And so there are all of these different things like that, that when you write these topics, you're immediately giving the reader what they want on like this very basic level. And I'm not doing it justice at all. But that day when my sister and I talked about it, she said, be sure you remember to write to the id. And basically what that means is, try not to second guess yourself and be judgy on yourself, thinking, oh, people are going to think this is ridiculous, or people are going to think this is corny or trite or, cliche or whatever. It's cliche for a reason. And so, so you may think, oh, writing about billionaires is cliche. Well, then don't do it in a cliche way. But writing about billionaires is popular for a reason, a scientific reason that has to do with our brains. And so I love that. And basically the language that I use to describe this is writing with indulgence. And indulge those parts of a romance story that you really want to just roll around in and wallow in. And so the first book that I wrote, which has never seen the light of day and will never see the light of day, but like I said, it was a male-female romance. And there's a scene where the villain breaks into the woman's apartment and scares the crap out of her, and tries to attack her or whatever. I can't even remember the details. And she escapes. I can't remember how. And she's in the sort of the bottom of the stairwell in her apartment complex when the hero shows up, and the hero finds out, that she was attacked or whatever, and all the emergency vehicles are there, and the cops and the firemen, and she's wrapped up in a blanket and she's sniffling, and he comes in and he just scoops her up, and he just wraps her up in his arms. And it's so freaking cliche, but I love every second of that. I love that. I could read that in every single book for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And so the first thing is, it's really cool to find out that, like, I'm justified in loving that, there's a scientific reason why that appeals to me, that being cared for, being treated like a treasure, somebody being tender and gentle and maternal, towards us and taking care of us and protecting us. And so I find myself, in fact, this just came up recently with the new series that I've been writing. I just published a third book a couple of weeks ago. And in the first two books, there's a scene where somebody ends up in the hospital injured. Okay. I love that. I love writing that. I could write it all the time for that exact same reason. The other person comes flying in. Are you okay? And I made myself not write a scene like that in the third book, because I'd inadvertently written it in both of the other books in the series. And one of the readers noticed, she's like, as long as they don't go to the hospital in this one, because, I kept expecting them to go to the hospital in this one. And I was like, yes, they didn't go to the hospital. I did the right thing. But normally I lean into it. That's what my sister is like, lean into that, because if you want it, and you're the quintessential reader of this genre, or you're the quintessential romance reader, whatever it is, like if you feel like you represent this type of book, like you're a good representation of this fan of this kind of book, or the reader, lean into those things. Don't be afraid to lean into those indulgent elements. And also, another phrase that my sister and I talk about is stomp on that beat, like when you, like the meet cute or the first kiss, stay there for a minute. Let us wallow in that. Show us that for longer than half a second. I was beta reading a book for somebody recently, and there's a meet cute in a bar, and then it says, and then we had a conversation, and then the bar started closing, and I'm like, oh,
Wait.
You just met. Like, I want to see that conversation. How are you talking to each other? Is it awkward? Is it funny? Is it banter? Is it like, what? Is it natural?
I had that recently with another book where I was like, oh, they just did something too fast. And you're just like, no, I fully get it. I want to wallow. Yeah. That's so funny.
And my sister beta read one of my books at one time, and I'm like, something's wrong and I don't know what it is. And she started reading it. She's like, the meet cute happens off page. You can't have the meet cute happen off page. The reader came here to see these two meet and fall in love.
Yeah.
And I was like, of course, like it sounds so obvious when you say it, but it's not always obvious when you're writing it. But anyway, so Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and you and I talked about this, but Jennifer Lynn Barnes also at RAM 2019 gave a talk on fandom, the science, the psychology of fandom. That's what it is, the psychology of fandom. That was a huge aha moment for me, because we talk a lot about, as readers of romance, we internalize the romance beats, we internalize what works and what doesn't work. And so if you read a lot, you may not realize why you're writing what you're writing the way you're writing it, but you're doing it because of years of having, internalized it. So Jennifer Lynn Barnes starts going through the common elements of fandom based on all of this scientific research that she's done. And she starts talking about some of the common factors in common elements in fandom properties like NCIS and, all these Buffy, all these big fandom properties. And she starts listing off these elements. So she talks about the skydiving test, which is giving the fans a new experience. And so they basically, it's like subversive education. They're learning about something new. And so I wrote a book called Felix and the Prince, which is my royal romance. And Felix he has an interest in stained glass, the science of stained glass and the art of stained glass. And in the process of the story, I had done a lot of research on stained glass. And so I'm revealing this. Felix is revealing this in the story as it pertains to the story, like what causes different colors in the glass and stuff like that. And so to me, I don't know if you guys have taken Becca Syme's like Write Better, Faster class and oh gosh, I forgot the name of the test, but anyway, the test.
The strengths test.
Clifton Strengths.
The Clifton Strengths. Yeah, thank you. The Clifton Strengths. Well, I'm very high input. So I like learning new things.
Number one.
And like, I am like, and it explains so much, right? So I love learning new things. So to me, I get to learn all about stained glass and include it in a book. So I do that for a lot of my books because I'm just high input and I like to learn things. Yeah. And so she says, this is the skydiving test. And I was like, oh my gosh, people talk about that stained glass all the time with that book and how much they loved, or they see a TV show about stained glass and they share it with me. Yes. And so then she talks about the theme park test, which is creating this setting in your world or in your book that take out the story and the characters and people would still want to visit this place. Okay. So like Harry Potter, you've got, the school and, there are a million examples of this, but I realized that like in my first series I had done, it was set around this big lodge at a vineyard, and a lot of the sort of the big family meetings or, I called it a love posse, but would happen in the lobby of the lodge. And that was like, you felt like if you went there, if such a place existed and you walked in, you'd be one of the family, you would like feel that sense of belonging. And that's another element of fandom properties is there's a team element. You feel like you're part of the team. And when you create that, the reader feels like they're a part of the team. Yeah. So like on NCIS, there is literally a team. Yeah. And then there's multi-generational. She talked about all these different elements. And the whole time I'm sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, this explains why my series like resonated with people because I must have somehow along the way internalized some of these things because I've always been a big TV watcher, up until I started writing and stopped watching TV. But, and like, if you write about the things that work for you in the art that you consume, that's all happening for a reason.
And also you're a huge reader, so you would have taken that on board subconsciously for sure. As well. Isn't it, it's so validating when somebody puts a name to it, like the theme park world, there's small town romance. Why do people love small town romance? It's they want to belong somewhere. They want to be seen. They want to, accepted for their quirks, but also it's a beautiful setting. So it's a theme park setting as well, usually. Yeah. Fascinating.
It's a lot of it, and a lot of it we do automatically. Like we kind of know that people want to be a part of something, but it's what I like about Jennifer Lynn Barnes is that she kind of itemizes it out, and you kind of go, actually, Does she have a talk on the fandom stuff that she like, other than the one that we listened to at RAM? Do you know?
I think so. I think there might be a YouTube video of her talking about it at a conference, or
I'll do some research, and if there is, I'll put it in the show notes.
Do a search for, because it would be this, I think it's the Psychology of Fandom. And I think she talked about it somewhere before RAM that is out there somewhere.
She's talked about, I know she's been to NINC and other places, so, and she's definitely, obviously RWA. So I wish she'd write that book, damn it.
Yeah.
I know. The id book is written. It's written. It's just not out yet.
She hasn't written a book on fandom. Is she still going to publish it?
But I think she was, but I mean, I think, and she has little kids and she's a full-time,
she just needs to give it to one of us. We'll volunteer as tribute to do it. No problem.
Charge $100 per copy. You'll make a lot of money because we're all still going to buy it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I think we're coming to the end of our time together. It was more than 30 minutes that I promised to the intro. Of course, it never is. But is there anything else that you want to add, Lucy, about your the things that you've done? Any last piece of advice that you think people would want to know about or that you found useful?
I feel like a couple of things that have made a difference for me along the way was, and I think Whitney G talked about this in the first year of RAM at the RAM conference, again, referencing that, but 6-figure author mentality. Think like a 6-figure author. So an example of that is, you're working on your blurb, which most of us hate working on our blurbs, and you hate working on blurbs. So you're like, it's good enough. What would a 6-figure author do? Would a 6-figure author say, this crappy blurb is good enough? Or would they keep working on it until it was, killer, one-clickable? That's helped me a lot. Don't think of yourself as a newbie, no-name author, even if you feel like you are a newbie, no-name author. Think of yourself, the way it's sort of like what you think about, you bring about. Because one day, hopefully you will be that big name author. And so, and there's really no difference between you and that big name author. They're just further along in their journey probably, or, but they started the same place you did. That's another good thing, is don't compare your day 1 to somebody else's day 10,000, because that happens a lot. A lot of people are sort of like, I could never have a career like yours. And I'm like, well, that's because you're just starting. Yeah. I didn't start, I didn't have 4,000 copies of my first book fly off the shelf that first week, that I was an author. So you have to give yourself grace. I'm always learning. I'm always trying to improve. I'm not content with where I am, even with my craft. I think I write good books, but they could be better. They can always be better. So I'm constantly self-educating. That goes back to that input. That's part of why I'm self-educating, because that is part of my personality. Yeah. But I have a stack of craft and business books that I'm constantly, trying to go through. Don't fall into the trap of thinking there's one right way. Yes. Test and see what works for you. And alternatively, when you're helping others, remember that just because it works for you doesn't mean it's going to work for them. I have to remind myself of that, because that's a trap, that you can fall into, thinking, well, I'll tell you how I did it and you do it like that. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for them.
Yeah.
But yeah. And again, just remembering that you can do this for the money and for the love of it, and for the craft of it. It doesn't have to be either or.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. That's awesome.
Absolutely love that. We need a t-shirt with that one on.
Doesn't have to.
Right, exactly.
Love and money.
Exactly. And it's okay to just do it for the money too. That is okay too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, nobody asks a surgeon, why they do it for the money. Like, why do you get paid so much? Why don't you do this for free? Why do you charge so much? Like, I don't know. I mean,
agreed.
That's a frustrating topic that we deal with a lot, but yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, and where can people find you if they're wanting to look into your books and your everything else?
Everything else. Definitely my website, www.lucylennox.com. That's easy enough. There's some free stuff there. And foreign editions, translations, all that kind of stuff. Everything's there, reading order and everything. But the most fun place to find me is my reader group on Facebook. It's called Lucy's Lair. And it's super fun. It's a great group. Like, we would love to have you come join and just try it, see what you think. The people are incredible. It's really fun being in a group of people who love the same stuff you love, and you get to share that passion. Yeah,
that's awesome.
That's my favorite.
And a shout out to your website. I was looking through it earlier, and I think it's a really great example of an author website.
It's just great.
It was
thank
awesome.
you. It's new.
Yeah,
it's new this year.
Nice. And clean in terms of design, but it's all there. Really,
Yeah, I was quite impressed too.
So Carrie Loves is the one who did that. Yeah, and she does a lot of author websites. Yeah. If anybody has any that's another thing I did want to say. I love helping other authors. If anybody wants to reach out to me, send me a Facebook message request. Email me at lucy@lucylennox.com. I love talking about this business. I love, if answering questions or pointing you in the right direction. I don't hesitate to reach out.
That's awesome.
Very generous,
that's beautiful.
Very kind.
So if all the people who listen to the podcast email you, then you will be very busy and may never be able to write again.
We also hope they buy a book on their way through. Just
Yeah.
That's right. You have to show me the receipt before I'll answer a question, but that's not a big deal.
I will ask us a question on what happened on page 18 of Borrowing Blue. So, yeah.
And on that note, where can we be found, Char?
We can be found at sparkgirlspodcast.com, and just wanted to give a special thank you to the people that are subscribing to our YouTube channel. It's growing. It's not just people that we've coerced to click the subscribe button now. It's actually like real live people that we don't know, which is awesome. So thank you very much.
We're watching our faces as we talk.
And it's just and we so appreciate people like Lucy that are happy to have their faces with us, because it's a big thing to
put on clothes today.
It's important. I'm glad you put on clothes. Awesome.
Not pajamas.
I wouldn't know. You could have pajamas on and I wouldn't be able to tell.
That's true. It's the beauty of shoulders up.
I'm totally naked from the waist down, by the way.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for putting that in my head now. Right.
Thank you so much, Lucy. What a treat, and just absolute. This is going to be a re-listen to this one. Like, there's a lot, and we just want to thank you so much for your generous sharing, because that was hugely helpful to
thank you for having
everybody.
me. I mean, it was I screamed when you guys invited me to come on the podcast, and my family knows who you guys are, and so everybody was we were celebrating in my house. I'm very excited to be here, so thank you for having me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Spa Girls podcast. We will be back again next time, same place, same time, same bat channel, but for now, see you all. Bye.